Hello, everyone. Welcome, Core Reporters. Excited to be with you again today to talk about estate planning and important financial documents that you should have in place as you are going through life and through your career, and just make sure that really it's all the backup plans that you need to have in place to be protecting your family. Let's dive right in today, and we're going to talk about the 7 key documents that you need to make sure you have in place so that your family is protected and going to be well taken care of. So let's dive right in. All right. The reason I wanted to talk about estate planning today and go through just document and financial document planning is, one, most people don't have any of their estate planning in place. It's something that you think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And you just put it on the back burner when it comes to your own financial planning. And so number one is it just doesn't get done. So I want to make sure that I talk about the importances of getting these documents in place and make sure that you're doing it and following through. And then number two is specifically for court reporters, is you also have the issue of business planning as well. You know, what are you going to do with your transcripts that aren't completed and your accounts receivables, right? Who's going to take that over and manage those things for you as well? So there's a second level to this that you need to pay attention to. So document number one that you need to have in place, or I guess 1 and 2, would be having a will and a trust. Now, a lot of people think, oh, like I just need a will and that'll be okay for me. Most of the time, we actually don't see people just getting a will in place. And the big difference between the will and the trust is the will does not avoid probate. So whatever you put in the will, if you're saying that there's going to be a transfer of assets, let's just say you said, I want to transfer my bank accounts to my spouse or my kids, then that account will have to go into probate and go to court, and they'll have to look at the will and say, okay, yes, this is all legitimate, and then move the account over. And not only is that expensive to have to pay for the court fees to go through that whole process, but it's also time consuming as well. So with the trust, you get to avoid probate completely. So essentially the way it works, like with our firm, is if someone passes away, they just bring in the death certificate and the trust documents that show who's in charge of the trust and the accounts. And then they can just handle it and move the money over, and we can just get it processed right away. So there's no back and forth, there's no courts involved or anything like that. So it's a lot easier to handle. The other main reason that we like using a trust over a will for a lot of your bigger accounts is that with a trust, you get to specify exactly what happens with the money. If you want your beneficiaries to take all your money and put it on black at the casino, you get to say that and specify what exactly happens with those funds. You can say that it can only be spent for a certain person. You can say that only 10 grand a month could ever be withdrawn from the account. Whatever you put in there has to be followed. So you get a much more control over what's going on in the account and how the money's being spent, which I know is important for a lot of people. Although it's important to have the trust, a will is still good for any of the less valuable items that are easily transferable, like business equipment or your inexpensive jewelry or clothes or small collectible trinket items. Things like that are a great place to put in the will, just because they're nice and easy to get that stuff moved around and handled. You don't really have to deal with any banks or investment firms or anything like that. So document number 2 is going to be having a financial power of attorney. Power of attorney is a great document because basically the way that it works is if something happens to you and you're incapacitated, then you can have someone else manage your accounts for you. And so they can write checks, they can pay bills, handle really anything going on with your taxes and your financial planning, since you're not going to be able to do that stuff on your own. I see there's a little bit of an error here in the bullet points. I know we got court reporters on here, so don't grill me too hard on that. But yeah, if you can't handle yourself and handle your finances, you get to specify someone who can handle everything for you. I did note on here that you want to work with someone who understands your 1099 income. How does all of that work, and the income and the taxes and everything that goes along with that? So it's important that you pick maybe not just like a spouse, but a trusted professional that knows what's going on with all these moving pieces. So document number 3 is going to be a healthcare directive. So very similar to the power of attorney, except this is focused on the health side of things. So number 1 is who's going to make decisions for you as far as any health concerns. If you're sick and you're in the hospital and they don't know what care to administer to you, even if you're on life support and things like that, those documents will, number 1, allow someone to make the decisions for you. If we're talking about like a healthcare directive or a healthcare power of attorney, they get to make the decisions. But then you also have a living will, and a living will be essentially what will happen if it's a life or death situation. Do you want to stay on life support or have the plug pulled? Not the most fun conversations here, but definitely important ones to think about, and think about what you would want to happen. So a power of attorney to give someone the ability to make decisions, and then a living will to specify what you want to happen. And then lastly is a HIPAA authorization. So if there's any family members that wouldn't be authorized to see your medical records and be able to handle all these situations, then making sure that you have those documents in place is important. All right, this one looks like got a little bit messed up here, but the 4th thing I want you to think about is going to be business succession planning. So when it comes to the business succession planning, number 1 is you need to notify your clients, any of the attorneys or agencies that you're working with, and make sure that they know what's going on. So who is that person that's going to know who you're working with at any given time? Maybe you have some software tracking, or you're keeping like a working document of what's going on, but having something in place where you have the list of people that need to be notified from a business standpoint, that, you're either incapacitated or that something happened to you and, you're not able to help anymore. Next is going to be handling things like your equipment that you have. Those stenographs are not cheap, and you want to make sure that you have some valuations on some of your equipment, and maybe family members don't know what some of those things that you own are worth. So it'd be good just to have that written down somewhere so they know how to handle and distribute that. Buyout agreements, I'm not exactly sure if these are hugely relevant with court reporters. So it's definitely something to think about as far as like your relationships and clients that you work with, if there's anything that could be bought from you, but maybe tying in with the equipment evaluation and any other business items that you have. Maybe you have another court reporter who is basically saying, hey, I'm going to be willing to buy all this stuff off of you if something ever happened to you. And maybe there's some type of payout where you get to refer that court reporter as like the person that they work with going forward for all of your clients. So it could even be as simple as like an email. This person's not around, you should start using this person instead. And maybe there's some type of valuation to that. And then lastly is transcripts, archive access. So wherever you're handling your computer and all that, have it written down somewhere where there's like your passwords, knowing, where to get access to this confidential information, and how it should be distributed back to the attorneys and clients that you're working with. So document 5 is going to be your insurance documentation. So this is really important, especially with things like life insurance, annuities, any disability insurance. As you can imagine, if you're disabled and you're not able to work, then you're also not going to be able to handle some of these things potentially and get these policies paying out to you. So you want to make sure that you have all these written down, who's the agent on record for these policies to contact. So make it nice and easy there. And then on the life insurance side, sometimes I see that people don't even know that their person that passed away, family member, spouse, even had a certain life insurance policy. I know even parents, they pass away and you don't even find out that they have a life insurance policy till way after the fact when you're sorting through all the paperwork that they had stacked up. So you want to make sure that stuff's nice and easy to find and able to keep track of. So number 6 is going to be a financial account inventory. I wouldn't even just call this like a balance sheet, would be good as well. But just where are your accounts located? What accounts do you have set up? So just having that organized where you have all of your assets, everything that you own in your accounts, your retirement accounts, and then also your debt as well. What credit card accounts do you have? I know we all have quite a few out there. So, we got to make sure we canceling all those credit cards, notifying the appropriate people, making sure that you're not getting charged all this interest on these cards that if you're passed away, you couldn't pay off anyways. So we want to make sure that there's just somewhere where it at least lists out all the accounts that you have, and even rough balances would be good. And most importantly, like what bank or investment firm they're set up with. So number 7 is just your digital estate plan. And I think this is just pooling everything else that we may have missed at this point. So number 1, if you use like a password manager, so making sure that you have somewhere where that's listed, and maybe you have the password listed somewhere or notified to your spouse, but somewhere you can get the master password to access all of your different passwords for your business. That's something that I do personally is I have my one master password that gets me into my password manager. Then once you're in there, you have the list of all my passwords to use to be able to get into different programs to handle everything for my clients. So you're going to want something similar if you haven't done that already. Also access to your email, and again, any of that transcript storage or any files that you have saved anywhere, the different software that you're using, what programs, and really just it's trying to get every last bit of passwords and accounts that you have set up out there. And then lastly, it's going to be social media as well, right? Who gets access to the Instagram account and the Facebook that you're on right now watching this? Also need to put in the social media. Again, you can have the accounts that you have set up. You can have the passwords listed in the password manager, as well as if you want to get really in the weeds, what they're allowed to do with the account or deletion instructions, things like that as well. So as far as getting all these documents and securing them together, there's definitely different routes that you can go. Number 1, some people like to have a physical copy on file. Always important that you put it in some type of fireproof safe and have the official original documents, and then even maybe a copy somewhere else. If you have a business location or a family member that you can trade documents with, if you have a sibling and something happened to their house, you have a copy of their documents and vice versa. You can do something like that and even have it locked up if you really want to make sure they're not looking at it. Also digital as well. So having some type of platform where you can have that stored, that's in the cloud that you can access anywhere and that someone can get to easily. Or even simply like an emergency binder, I think is good. And just having page after page of what's next and what needs to be done. None of this stuff is fun and exciting again, right? But if something happened to you, especially if you passed away, that's a lot to go through for your family and your beneficiaries while they're also grieving your loss as well. So you're really putting a lot on them in those types of situations. And this will just make their life so much easier. So I know it's not fun, and I don't think it's going to happen to anyone on here anytime soon, but it's important things to get done. So some of the common mistakes that I see, even with court reporters specifically, is any business continuity planning. So did you already set up all those moving pieces that I talked about as far as what to do, as far as notifying your clients and how to handle transcripts and handle shutting down the business, that whole process? I find that most court reporters haven't done that, and their spouse has no idea what to do in that type of situation. Also, I see outdated beneficiaries all the time. This is something we're always reviewing with our clients to look at their accounts and see who their beneficiaries are. So this is an easy one that you could even go through today and look at all of your accounts and see who the beneficiaries are listed on all those accounts and just make sure everything's up to date there. Also, not having family aware of how you operate and what's going on. Do they know that you have business accounts over here with this bank, and then you have your retirement investment accounts over here with this company, right? If they don't even know what's going on, they don't know where to start, I guess you could say, with that planning. And then lastly, I think a lot of people think of just like passing away and death as where this stuff comes into play. But another big side of it is even shorter term disabilities and handling some of those other smaller instances like the healthcare directive and the HIPAA forms, that's a lot more likely to be used in the near term, that someone would need to be able to make healthcare decisions for you and get access to your medical records and know what's going on, right? It's important to not only think about the absolute worst case scenario, but also thinking about being out of work and being in the hospital and having someone that can access all this stuff for you. So as far as steps to take after today, I know there's a lot of documents in there, and probably if you try to do them all right now, you drive yourself crazy and not do any of them. But I think first and foremost, number one, I would look at listing out all of your accounts in your policy somewhere, right? Build out that balance sheet and then have a copy or even just a screenshot of the insurance policies that you have with the policy numbers on there if anyone was to need that information. As I mentioned, checking the beneficiary designations, that's an easy win. It's something that you can do pretty quickly. It's also something that could be a huge headache if it's wrong and there's an ex-spouse on there, or it's supposed to go to the sibling or parents and never was transferred over to the current spouse to receive those assets. That can cause a pretty big problem. And then lastly is meeting with an estate planning attorney. So we talked about the trust and the will at the beginning of this presentation. So making sure you get those in place. As far as recommendation that I have for anyone with an estate under $3 million, I would recommend that you use trustandwill.com. It's basically like a TurboTax for estate planning. And so you don't actually meet with an estate planning and attorney. You just plug in everything that you want to happen. There's like a bunch of questionnaires that you go through, and then they mail you your trust documents and your will documents. They'll even do some of those healthcare directives and things like that as well as just part of the overall package. They mail it to you, and then you just go get it notarized and sign it. And now it's in place and you're good to go. What I've seen is that those are like $500-$600 for a trust. If you do hire an estate planning attorney, I've seen that cost anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000. So it's significantly more expensive. If you're curious when you should invest in a trust, I would say the starting point would be either when you have kids or when you own a home. So if you have kids or you own a home, I think it's time to get a trust and make sure that you have a little bit more planning established than just beneficiaries listed on your accounts. And then if you're under $3 million estate, so under 3 million of all your assets combined, then I would recommend you go with trustandwill.com, like I mentioned. Anything over that, it's probably a little bit more complex, and you're probably at a point where you want to pay a little bit extra and get an estate planning attorney, double checking everything that you're doing. I didn't see any questions coming in during the presentation today, but if anyone has any questions, if they're watching this after the fact, definitely post them in the comments on the Facebook group so we can all chat about it, or send me a DM individually if it's more of a specific question that you don't want to share. I'm happy to get that answered for you as well. But otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.